What's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video. Today, we're going to be talking Boston Celtics. A couple months back when Porzingis was traded there, I made a full video breaking down this new Boston team. And I talked all about how I thought the Porzingis trade was going to be huge for them, how I really liked the team that they'd put together, and called them my favorites in the Eastern Conference. But since that trade happened, a lot has changed, specifically in that same East. Of course, the Milwaukee Bucks started things off by out of nowhere trading for Damian Lillard, setting up arguably the best duo in the league between him and Giannis. You've also got Brook Lopez over there, Chris Middleton, a new coach with Adrian Griffin. That Bucks team looks stacked, and I made a full video talking about why that Bucks team is going to be really good with Dame. So it only seems right now that Jrue Holiday has been sent over to the Celtics from the Blazers following that deal, that I do the same for the Celtics, because this team is similarly very stacked. I think the Bucks and Celtics are clearly the best two teams in the East. They're going to be battling it out to see who ends up winning the conference. And while Dame is a huge splashy acquisition, I think Jrue Holiday is similarly impactful for the Celtics as well as Kristaps Porzingis. And so I want to go ahead and break down why I like this team so much, why they're going to be terrifying for any team to face off against, and why this might be the Celtics team that finally gets over the hump and wins them a title in this Jason Tatum era. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. Let's go ahead and get into it. First, let's talk a little bit about the Celtics of last year. There was turmoil following their finals appearance in 2022, specifically with Ime Udoka being fired like right before the season. I think Mazzulla was made head coach like a day before training camp or something like that. It was a tumultuous start to the year for them, but even so, they were very successful. They were top two defense and offense according to offensive and defensive rating. They ended up getting the second seed in the Eastern Conference, only behind the Milwaukee Bucks. Jason Tatum had the best individual season of his career, putting up over 30 points per game, making All-NBA first team, and finishing top 5 in MVP voting along the way. Jaylen Brown, similarly, best year of his career individually, All-NBA for the first time, over 26 points per game, and All-Star, of course. They were both amazing. They established themselves as one of the best duos in the league and took leaps beyond what many people thought they were going to do. I've said before that I think Jason Tatum is a future MVP. I think he's on that path. And similarly, I think Jaylen Brown is really good. And at this point, following their playoff run, I think he's become kind of underrated. In addition to the play from those guys, you got great supporting play from guys like Marcus Smart, Derek White, who made an all-defensive team and took an offensive jump, Al Horford, who knocked down threes at a ridiculous clip, Robert Williams, who is still a great defensive anchor, Malcolm Brogdon, who won Sixth Man of the Year. This team was able to put things together and make it to the Eastern Conference Finals to again face the Miami Heat, who it feels like they always face at when they make it to that point. And this time against the Heat, it was an 8-seeded team. It was the team they were favored against, but they lost. Now, they went down 0-3, of course, came back to tie things up 3-3 before getting blown out on their home court in Game 7, failing to become the first team to ever recover from that deficit. It was a heartbreaking end to their tale of comeback after, again, being the favorites and going down 3-0 to an 8 seed, but they fell short, and there's a couple of reasons why. The first one is just offensive stagnation. This team was really good offensively. That was their calling card for the most part this past year, but they kind of fell apart in that big time moment, which is something we've seen from the Celtics at times. Their offense will start to stall out when the game slows down the final possessions. They'll go to ISO ball, they'll go Jason Tatum, then Jaylen Brown, then Tatum, take some bad shots, force things up, really just go away from the things that got them to that point. We saw this again. We also saw them completely drop off the cliff in three-point percentage. They were abysmal shooting against the Heat. Jaylen Brown's three was nowhere to be seen. Tatum's wasn't good. Brogdon, who is a great three-point shooter, was dealing with a shoulder injury, so his shot completely disappeared. They just couldn't knock down threes. And against a Heat team that specifically made it to that point for the most part because of their three-point shooting, they really were no match. And that was also the Celtics weren't as good defensively last year as they were under Ime Udoka. Mazzulla, I thought, did a pretty good job as a first-year head coach, but ultimately was not able to get them as stout on the defensive end as Udoka did the year before. This was all in addition to a turnover problem, which the Celtics have faced at times as well. Specifically, we saw it against the Warriors in the 2022 finals. There were a couple of reasons. The Heat were also just good. They were unstoppable, seemingly, on this run going from 8 seed to NBA Finals appearance. And so the Celtics fell short of making back-to-back finals appearances. It wasn't a disaster of a season, but obviously it wasn't where they wanted to be. So in response, what did the Celtics do? They went out there and added not one, but 2 all-star caliber players in the same offseason, building a big four that really stacks up against any other foursome in the entire league. let's talk about Porzingis first, and then we'll get into Jrue Holiday a bit later. I love the Porzingis trade when it happened. I've talked about that all summer here in the channel. I still love it now, maybe even more than when it actually happened, especially with the Jrue Holiday acquisition, because I think those two guys can play pretty well off each other as well. Porzingis adds a completely new dynamic to this Celtics offense that they've really been missing. He just had the best offensive season of his entire career, putting up a career-high 23.2 points per game to go with a 62.7 true shooting percentage, which also was his career high. He shot incredibly well from three, way better than he had over the past couple of seasons. He actually played a good number of games too. He played above 60 for the first time in quite some time. He was great in the post as a scorer, way better than he's been in the past. Was actually one of the better post scorers in the league, which the Celtics really haven't had. It's now a different area that they can go to offensively because Al Horford and Robert Williams weren't backing guys down in the post consistently in the past. So now he comes in. He's also just a 7-footer that can spot up and knock down threes at a near 40% clip on the perimeter. He's going to change things a lot. He also was utilized a ton out of the high post in terms of offense last year with the Washington Wizards, a role that he was really good in, a role that I think he can play extremely well here in Boston with even more talent around him now. Not to mention the fact that at 7'3", he's going to be an elite lob threat, giving them great vertical spacing for when Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Jrue Holiday, whatever one of these guys goes ahead and drives into the paint, Porzingis can go ahead and dive to the basket, catch a lob pretty easily, finish through contact, finish over guys. He's going to change everything for them. And then defensively, I mean, he's a 7'3" guy out there. They haven't had someone with that type of height on this roster really ever. I don't think. No one's coming to mind. Probably never that they've had a guy of this height. He's able to block shots at a high level. He's able to just get some good contests. He's going to change things for them. I really think Kristaps helps this team on both ends dramatically. I don't think a lot of people watched the Wizards last year, so people don't realize how good Kristaps was last season. He could have been an all-star. Of course, the Wizards weren't very good, so he wasn't. But I think Porzingis could be in for maybe the best season of his entire career this year, playing alongside these guys. Probably won't be numerically because other guys are going to be taking numbers, but in terms of raw impact on winning and just helping this team go to places maybe they haven't been yet, Porzingis is going to really, really help. Then, of course, we have Jrue Holiday, who, again, changes everything. Last season, he had one of his best years of his entire career. He put up 19.3 points per game, 5.1 rebounds, 7.4 assists, 1.2 steals on 58.6 true shooting percentage, the third highest of his entire career, and got his second ever All-Star appearance. He was huge for the Bucks. They were missing Chris Middleton a lot of the year. Giannis missed some time. They needed Jrue to step up and be this all-star caliber guard, score way more, knock down his threes, play make. He had to do a bit more of everything, and Jrue thrived in that role again, helping the Bucks get that 1 seed despite Chris missing a majority of the season and not looking good when he was actually playing, them having some other injury issues. Jrue was the linchpin for that team last season. He was amazing. And now he joins a Boston team where, again, he's going to be surrounded by a lot of talent, and I think it's the perfect talent to let him thrive and play the best form of basketball that he can. Obviously, with Jrue Holiday, you're going to get defense. So the people that were worried about losing Marcus Smart in the Porzingis trade, oh, how's their guard defense going to look? They're going to lose that dog type of player, the guy that's going to make the gritty hustle plays. Jrue is that type of player. He's been one of the best perimeter defenders in the league for years at this point, and he and Derek White, if they're ever on the court together, form by far the best defensive backcourt in the league. I don't even think it's close. There is no one else that comes to mind that has two firmly all defensive caliber guards that can go out there and clamp up opposing teams. This is phenomenal because the East has a lot of great guards. Damian Lillard is now over here, their biggest rival in the Bucks. They answer the Dame acquisition by picking up Jrue, who is also going to be motivated to play the Bucks and is one of the best perimeter defenders. Jalen Brunson's really good. Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, Tyrese Maxey, James Harden. A lot of these teams, Tyler Hero even, like so many of these teams have great offensive guards, and now they've got an elite backcourt that can slow those guys down. His overall disruptiveness, I think, will be good for offense too, because he's going to be able to create turnovers in transition, help the Celtics get out and run, get some easier looks. So in those late games where they're struggling to create in the half court, he can get them out in transition, play making those scenarios well as well. Jrue is just going to be a big benefit defensively, and I think that'll help the offense, which is also a bolster in as well. He was a much better shooter than Marcus Smart last season. He shot 5 full percentage points better than Smart from 3 on over half an attempt per game more. He beats him in basically every offensive metric as well. I took a look at B-Ball Index. Jrue is so clearly a better offensive player as well. And in terms of playmaking, he was 13th in assists per game over the past 2 seasons. He is turnover prone at times. It's not terrible, but there are some turnover issues here and there. But he's also going to now be playing alongside Derek White, who's good in that regard. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Porzingis, who each of them have some issues here and there. But I think as a group of four, allowing different guys to handle the ball, having all these different offensive weapons so teams can't send doubles or try and exploit their weaknesses, I think it'll be big for all of them in limiting turnovers and helping this team play a lot more stable offense when you get to those final moments. This is also helpful because at times we've seen Jrue struggle to score efficiently in the playoffs, but he's probably most nights going to be their fourth, maybe even fifth option, depending on what Horford or Derek White, whoever's starting in the lineup, is doing out there. But he's going to be firmly behind Tatum, Brown, and Porzingis. They're not going to look to Jrue to score very much. He's not going to be asked to be that 3 option, maybe even 2 option, unless there's injuries. He's going to just be that supporting player, and if he can just spot it for threes, he's also one of the best players in the league as a pull-up shooter, as someone attacking off the catch. He's going to be lethal in those scenarios. He doesn't have to do too much, and I think that's good for Jrue. Not to mention the fact that he's a pretty good pick-and-roll ball handler as well, and he's going to be playing alongside Kristaps Porzingis, who can be that lob threat, who can step out and hit threes on pick-and-pop scenarios. If he doesn't have the ball in his hands, he's a great off-ball player as well. He's played alongside Chris Middleton and Giannis and all these guys. He knows exactly how to play that role and be really good in it. I think Jrue is going to be put in a great position to succeed over here in Boston. Just by adding these two guys, I think the Celtics have made themselves way more dynamic. They're going to be able to switch almost everything with certain lineups out there with good to great defenders basically everywhere on the court. If they run out a starting lineup of Jrue Holiday, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Kristaps Porzingis, there's no bad defender in that lineup. Even if you put Al Horford in and switch out Derek White, again, same case. They don't have bad defenders that they have to hide defensively. Everybody can kind of hold their own. Plus, with those top 5-6 guys that I mentioned, everyone's able to knock down threes at a high level. They can consistently run 5 out. They're not going to have a big down low clogging up the paint. It's going to leave a lot of room for Jason Tatum to attack downhill, for Jaylen Brown to do the same thing. If Porzingis wants to post up, you can go ahead and do that as well. Just space out the floor with knockdown shooters everywhere. This Celtics team has so many threats out there on the court. I don't know what you do with all of them. Plus, like I just alluded to, they've got versatility. You want more guard defense, you put Derek White out there. You need a little bit more size. Say you're playing maybe with the Bucks and they've got Giannis and Brook Lopez out there. You're playing the Sixers and Embiid's out there. You want a little bit more size. You throw out Horford in that starting lineup. There's a couple different ways they can go, and it's going to make life so much easier for Joe Mazzulla and this whole team. Really, to sum it all up, this team is going to be terrifying. Those top 4, 5, 6 guys are maybe the best top 5, 6 in the entire league. They are so deadly with 4 all-star caliber players out there, and then Horford, who's really good. He's an ultimate glue guy, or Derek White, an all-defensive caliber player that showed a lot of offensive potential last year. They're amazing. Now, there are some holes on this roster, or at least not holes, maybe more so concerns that people have brought up, and I do think they're somewhat valid, so we should go over them, but also I think some of them are a bit overblown. The first thing you notice with this team is the depth. I'll admit the depth chart doesn't look great. Beyond those top 6 guys, it gets kind of thin. They lost Robert Williams with the Jrue Holiday trade, as well as Malcolm Brogdon, who again was 6th man of the year. Robert Williams was their defensive anchor for a little while, a big-time energy player, a lob threat. He did a bit of everything. Rob and Brogdon are big-time losses. You also lose Marcus Smart in the Porzingis trade, although I think Jrue Holiday is just a better version of what he brings to the table, so that's not a big-time loss. Really, Rob and Malcolm Brogdon as potential bench pieces, sometimes Rob started, are the biggest depth losses, and so they're going to be relying on guys like Peyton Pritchard, Sam Hauser, O'Shea Brissett, Lamar Stevens, who they recently signed. If there's injuries in the front court, Luke Cornett might have to get some minutes, maybe even Wenyen Gabriel, who they just picked up too. But those guys are some solid players in there. Like Pritchard has looked really good in the preseason. He hasn't been given many opportunities over the past few years because they've had all-around great guard play, but now they might call on him more often than not. So if Pritchard's ready for those scenarios like he seems to be in the preseason, I think he could surprise people. Sam Hauser was underrated last year. He's known primarily as like a shooter, but he also held his own defensively. He wasn't great, but he held his own at the very least. And when you have good defenders around him, I think he'll be perfectly fine. O'Shea Brissett is a solid piece. I think people are underrating him a little bit. Lamar Stevens, Wenyen Gabriel, those aren't bad pickups. Like, I don't think the depth is as terrible as people say. Is it good? No, they're definitely not one of the deepest teams out there, but I don't think it's going to break them or anything. I mean, we've seen, like with the Nuggets, if you've got enough high-end talent, you could just run a 7-8 man rotation and kind of get things done throughout the playoffs if you're good enough. Plus, this Celtics team, unlike a lot of other contenders, still has assets to upgrade. They can trade, I believe, at least 2 more first-round picks. They could throw out some pick swaps. They could put together some second-round picks. Now, salary is going to be hard to match for more expensive impact players, but if there's a guy out there on a really cheap contract that can help them, they can pick them up with ease. They've got assets to still upgrade this roster, and with Brad Stevens, who has been one of the most aggressive GMs in the league over the past few years, I expect them to do exactly that by the time the deadline rolls around. Now, I will say the other big concern is one that could definitely exacerbate this depth issue, and that's the matter of injury, specifically in that front court, because you've got 3 great guards with Derek White, Jaylen Brown, and Jrue Holiday that can slot back and forth if you need to, if one of them's out with injury. But in the front court, it's mainly Kristaps and Al Horford. Kristaps is going to be the backup center or the starting center if Horford's off the bench. Like, those are your 2 bigs. They've got Luke Kornet, Wenyen Gabriel, who can play if need be, but obviously it would be preferred if they didn't have to show up that much. So that's a bit concerning when Kristaps has only played 60 games once, which was this past season, so maybe that's promising. But he's only played 60-plus games once since he tore his ACL back in 2019. That's not the most encouraging thing. Plus, Al Horford is 37 years old. There's a chance that he could rack up some injuries with just mileage on his body. He's played over 60 games the past 2 seasons, so finger crossed that's not an issue, but it could potentially pop up. And really, this, I think, is the bigger concern for the Celtics. In terms of depth, it's not great, but I think they'll be fine. But if they deal with injuries, like if Kristaps misses a significant amount of time, specifically in the playoffs, or Al Horford does, they could stink quickly against some of those big-time matchups like Giannis or an Embiid or, the Cavs with those 2 bigs. It could get really scary fast for Boston. Even without injuries, I do think some of those bigger lineups with, say, Giannis and Brook Lopez for the Bucks or Joel Embiid for the Sixers could present them some problems, but I will say Al Horford's been pretty good at slowing those guys over the past few years. The Celtics have had success with him. Now, again, he's 37 years old, so maybe that's not as guaranteed this season, but I do think people are underrating Porzingis as well as a defender. Sure, he's a thinner body guy, but being a 7'3" player, just having that length is going to cause some problems. So it is a little bit concerning. I don't think their front court is as good defensively as, say, their back court, but I think it's plenty fine enough to hold up. Really, all in all, I just think this Celtics team is terrifying for both the Eastern Conference and the NBA as a whole. They are extremely threatening with a bunch of players that can give you 20, 30 points a night. Jason Tatum, an All-NBA first teamer, Jaylen Brown, an All-NBA guy, 2 All-Star caliber players in Jrue and Porzingis. I think an underrated supporting cast at some points. This team's going to be really good. Now, I haven't decided if I like them or the Bucks better to win the Eastern Conference. I think it's incredibly close between these 2 teams, but the Celtics, at the very least, with the Jrue Holiday acquisition and the Kristaps one, have kept up with the Bucks, and I think they're the only team in the East to do so. Right now, I think it's between those 2 teams, barring any major injuries. They will face off in either the Eastern Conference Finals or the semifinals, whatever. That, to me, right now, is the true Eastern Conference Finals, and the Celtics have done a great job of putting themselves in position, not just to beat the Bucks, but to maybe end up raising the Larry O'Brien at the end of it all. I really like this team. I think it's really well constructed. I love their top end talent. They're going to be terrifying to face off in any matchup, whether it's regular season, playoffs, anything. The Celtics may just very well be the best team in the NBA going into this season. I'd like to know your thoughts on this Celtics team going into the year. Let me know in the comments down below. What seed do you think they're going to get? Do you like them or the Bucks better for this upcoming season in terms of winning the Eastern Conference? Do you agree with me that the Porzingis and Jrue Holiday acquisitions were the right moves? Are you more worried about their depth, the injuries? Let me know, because I'd love to hear your thoughts on this Celtics team. Again, trying to figure out who I like better between the Celtics and the Bucks. I think it's extremely close. They're both really, really good. But yeah, for right now, I appreciate y'all watching. Again, let me know all your thoughts about the Celtics below. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.